Okay, welcome to the Hockey News Anaheim Ducks show. My name is Patrick Present, joined here by Derek Lee. We are the writers, editors, and reporters for THN.com/Anaheim. Derek, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing all right, Patrick. End of August, so it means that preseason is almost upon us and regular season should be here pretty soon.
That's right. So we asked you to send in questions. This is going to be our August or end of August mailbag as we look forward to the rookie camp, tournament, and training camp. So without further ado, let's get into your questions. So the first one here is from Barry E. He says, if Gudis is given the captaincy, do you think he gets his contract extended past 2026?
That's a good question. And I mean, a lot of that is focused around kind of these maybe little hints that Radko Gudas is going to be the next captain of the Anaheim Ducks. Um, it'll be interesting because he has 2 more years on his contract, right? Signed a 3-year deal last summer. And then if he's named the captain, you can kind of go either way. You can see it just depends on how he plays for the next 2 seasons too. I think if he continues to play kind of like how he did last season and the Ducks start to improve and they get closer to a playoff spot, then yeah, because the right side of the defense is pretty shallow behind Gudis. And you have Tristan Luneau, and then after that, it's kind of a mixed bag about what kind of right-handed prospects that the Ducks are dealing with right now. You got guys like Drew Helleson and Noah Warren, and it kind of remains to be seen what they could kind of do at the NHL level. Drew Helleson got 1 or 2 games at the end of not last season, but the season before that. So kind of want to see where they go from there. But I think if I had to give a straight answer right now, I would say yes. Maybe he gets like a 1 or 2 year extension, but you have to remember Radko Gudas is not the youngest guy either. I think he's 34, and so he'll be 36 at the end of his contract. So I think as of right now, if he got the captaincy and he continues to play well, then yeah. I mean, why not give him an extension? He's been a solid contributor for the Ducks so far.
Yeah, I agree. If he does get that C, I think it makes a lot of sense to bring him back. There's always a concern about the decline as he gets older, as he approaches 40, but he plays this kind of game where I don't think the drop off will be that steep just because of the style that he plays. I know he's very physical and he misses games every now and then, but at the same time he's not a burner, so his like speed going away isn't going to be much of a concern. And if they name him captain, I think any possibility if the Ducks aren't competitive next season that he might be on the trade block, but I think that goes away. And then yeah, I think an extension will be fully on the table in that case. Um, yeah, that's really all I got on that one. Moving on, this one's from Cash V, who asks, who will be the next Ducks player to hit 100 points?
I mean, my initial thought is it's got to be Leo Carlson, right? He's probably the guy that's going to be around for the longest based off of kind of the age group of the young core that they've got going on. I mean, it's hard to tell because everyone in that core is still so young too, so we don't really know like kind of what their ceiling is. But I think if you just look at all of them on paper, I think my bet would be Leo Carlson.
I'm gonna say Trevor Zegras because as great as Leo Carlson is, and as much as he might have more of an impact on both sides of the puck than Trevor Zegras, I think the ceiling for his point production might be a little bit limited, and not because he doesn't have the skill, because he completely does, but just he's going to eat some harder minutes and face the tougher matchups. And we've always compared him to Sasha Barkov, and Barkov's career high is 96 points. So I think Leo's kind of in that range, and if you would argue that Barkov's not one of the most impactful players, then you're crazy. So I'm gonna say Zegras, and then if not him, then I think we're looking at down the road to like Seneca. But um, there is a world where Leo Carlson is a 100-point player, but I just think he's gonna shoulder so much responsibility both ways, and that might limit his ceiling a little bit.
That's fair.
Okay. Moving on to Craig T asks, which prospects in your estimation have the best chance to make the bottom six out of camp between, and he gives us Colangelo, Sidorov, Regenda, and Nestorenko.
Well, out of those four, I think Sam Colangelo definitely has the upper hand. He got a couple of games at the end of last season. He didn't look too out of place. He did get those games in San Diego before he signed his ELC and came up with the Ducks. So, and he's also played 4 years in college. So it's kind of like Jackson LaCombe, where LaCombe played all 4 years and then he got a little bit of games at the end of his senior year of college. And then this past season, he played his entire season in the NHL. So I think it can kind of be like that. After that, I think maybe either Regenda or Nestorenko. Um, Personally, I think unless Sidorov like just extremely impressive in training camp or something like that, I think he should start the season in the AHL and kind of get a top six role there, kind of like what Nestorenko and Regenda have been doing for a little bit in the last couple of years in San Diego. So I think for me it would be Colangelo, and then let's say Nestorenko, Regenda, Sidorov.
Yeah, I think I have the same order as you. I think they like Colangelo. They like what he brings. He fit pretty seamlessly into what they're trying to build and what they're trying to do. And he provides like that net front kind of presence and skill that they're looking for and that they need, honestly, especially at the bottom of their lineup. Sidorov, I mean, we're all blown away by his skill and he's electric, but and this isn't a insult, but he plays a junior game. Like and his question the question around him is always, can he translate that to professional levels where the competition is bigger, meaner, stronger, faster? And there might be an adjustment period, there might not, but either way, I think starting him off in San Diego is probably the way to go. And then yeah, Nesterenko and Regenda, one of them can absolutely shine in a training camp and win out a spot, but um I think for whatever reason, for some, they need to maybe iron out a little bit more in their games as well. Okay. Okay, moving on. Yuhani N asks, besides Edmonton and Vancouver, who seem to be locks at 1 and 2 in the Pacific, do the Ducks have enough firepower to compete for the third spot or even a wild card, judging by what the other teams in the division did?
Well, for the 30 spots in the Pacific, I feel like it's probably going to be the same as its past season. So Edmonton, Vancouver, and Vegas. And then when it comes to those two wild cards, right, that can go either way. Last year it was the Kings and the Predators. I think we might see something kind of like that this year as well. I know some people are kind of concerned about the fragility of the Kings a little bit, just because their top guys are a little bit older. Kopitar and Doughty are, I think, 37 and 35. So if one of them was to go down, then that kind of tilts the boat a little bit. I mean, you got Quentin Byfield and you got Brant Clark, so those are supposed to be the next guys. And then they also brought in Darcy Kemper, swapping out Pierre Luc Dubois. So besides the Kings, I think maybe some you look like maybe somebody like Seattle. I know Seattle wasn't the greatest last year, just like the Ducks, but maybe they can kind of sneak in. I think if there's any hope for the playoffs for the Ducks, it's got to be through the wild card because I'm entirely confident that that top three is going to be the same as last year's.
See, I'm not as sold on Vancouver, especially with the Demko news coming out and the uncertainty around Shilovs and his injury and losing Elias Lindholm's big for them too. And like I'm just looking at their depth chart. I'm not completely sold, but I think Rick Tocchet is such a good coach and he gets the most out of them that, I just think the Pacific is kind of completely wide open right now. And LA, LA, this might be a step back year for an ultimate two steps forward kind of season in the future, just because now they're bringing in Spence and Clark to have more significant minutes and Byfield switching to his more natural position. So there might be some growing pains. Calgary is up like um still have some quality at the top of their lineup, but their depth has pretty much vanished. There is a path toward a wild card berth, but I mean, yeah, I don't think they're going to sneak into the top three, the Ducks, but I think the division is very, very up in the air right now. And Vegas lost Stevenson. They might have gotten a little worse, but I think it's Vegas, Edmonton for me, and then after that, there's like a cluster of, three teams right there. So, but I still think the Ducks are on the outside looking in.
Mhm.
All right, moving on. Okay, Tristan B asked, does Verbeek have any signings or trade cooked up before the year, or at least some PTOs?
Before the year, I think it would be pretty tough, just because once you start getting towards training camp and preseason, I think general managers like to have the roster set for the most part. I mean, we saw last year they brought in Zach Cassian on the PTO, and he actually made it quite far into training camp where we kind of thought that maybe he might have a chance to be on the team, but eventually they let him go. So I know you kind of mentioned a couple of guys that you'd like to see the Ducks take in on PTOs. So maybe we see something like that. But aside from that, I'd be pretty shocked if there was a trade or something that happened that kind of shook up the roster at this point. I mean, we saw with the Montreal Canadiens, they brought in Patrick Laine, and that was kind of just out of nowhere. There wasn't really anything leading up to the day of that trade. So maybe there's something like that going on. And I mean, Pat Verbeek is notorious at keeping this pretty tight, just from everything we've seen to this point. So unless they've got something surprising coming, I wouldn't anticipate anything big happening between now and the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I went back last year to see what kind of the buzz was and what the transactions were around the NHL around this time of year, and yeah, it's pretty quiet. There were there's the Line and the Askarov McGroarty trades, but those names off the board, you know, I don't see anything happening right now. I think everyone's roster is pretty set. I will circle Seattle just because unless they want to go into opening night with just a 20-man roster, they need to move some money around. But this is the season for PTOs and this is the season for waiver claims, which there are usually a decent amount of players put on waivers during training camp and preseason. So we'll see how that goes. But as far as the big trades, yeah, I don't see much happening. And as far as PTOs, I mean, Max Pacioretty's still out there. Tyler Johnson's still out there. I don't see them bringing in any defensemen. The names on the right side are pretty redundant to what they have and don't really fit the mold that the Ducks are trying to build, I think, on their blue line. So, and I don't think they're going after a left shot on the blue line. Um, so yeah, I mean that's all. That's what you got to look forward to is those PTOs and maybe a waiver claim, because like I said, there are usually some good players who teams just either can't afford or don't have room for, who are promising young players just that need a role. So we'll look forward to that. And then um Curtis B asks, do you get a sense for what is required of a rookie or a U21 player before the team will allow them to pick their own number? So this is um, in regards to who just got their number changed? Dang it, I'm
Lacombe,
forgetting.
Jackson
Lacombe just
Lacombe.
changed his number. Yeah, yeah, and speculation is around Minchikov and Zellweger currently. I think that need their long-term numbers. So what do you think about this?
I mean, well, because you look back at last season, right? Bill Carlson, he got 37 out of development camp, and then once it was kind of not really a no-brainer, but kind of like 97% that he was going to make the team, they allowed him to change his number to 91, which is what he's worn in the past. And then now Jackson Lacombe goes from 60 to 2, which is the number he wore in college. Um, when it comes to things like this, like right, we've seen Mason McTavish too last season. He went from 37 to 23, and that was also after a full season in the NHL. We also saw that with Trevor Zegras and James Drysdale in the past, going from 46 and 34 to 11 and 6. So I think it's kind of just once maybe you've established yourself kind of as an NHLer, right? Lacombe got his full season under his belt. McTavish did the same, and Zegras and Drysdale did that as well. I think it was kind of different for Carlson, um, his situation, just because he's such a high pick and he's such um, a what was the word I'm looking for? He's going to be such an integral part of the core. So it's kind of like, well, let's give him the number that he's going to wear for a long time because he's going to be here, or be around for a long time. And I think part of that is also kind of plays into marketing, right? Like
Mhm.
if the guy picks his number and he's going to be here for a long time, then you can kind of just start pumping out jerseys and especially for people who bought the Leo Carlson 37. That's a collector's item now. It's
Right.
kind of like when Troy Terry was wearing 61 for a little bit, and now he's 19. So you can kind of look back on that and say, hey, I knew about this guy before he got really big or before he changed his number to what he wears now. So
Yeah.
I think I don't think there's really anything that goes into it specifically. I think that's just kind of how I feel they looked at it is Leo Carlson's going to be here for a long time. Let him pick the number that he wants. And these other guys, once they have kind of established themselves and that we know they're going to be here at least for a little bit longer, then they can choose whatever number they want.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the Ducks recently tweeted out like, oh, 51 days until opening night and had Zellweger's 51 and his picture up there. So it's like leading speculation to, oh, maybe he's not getting his long-term number this season. But I think if I recall, they announced those number changes like right before the season, right? Last season when Gruel and Carlson got their numbers. So maybe they'll do the same thing with Michikov and Zellweger. A lot will be revealed, I think, closer when 34 days until opening night comes about. But yeah, as far as what goes into it, I just think it's yeah, when they're for sure going to be on the team for the rest of the season and they've earned their spot and there's no shot that they're going to get sent down or moved or whatever. So I'm still holding out hope and looking forward to when they change their numbers. Do you have any predictions for when they do?
For Zellweger, I would say probably three, just because
Yeah.
that's what he's worn in the past. Minchikov is a little kind of murky because a lot of the numbers that he's chosen are either taken or you would expect them to maybe be retired at some point. Um, I mean, for me, I personally I like 34. So if he changes it, I mean, for me, it doesn't really matter. I think even if he sticks with 34, it's fine.
Yeah, I remember Hampus Lindholm and Rickard Rakell, like they kept their rookie numbers. So I'm wondering
Josh
if
Manson
Minchikov
too.
did he? Yeah, you're right. So I'm wondering if Minchikov's just like, hey, you gave me 34, I'm just 34 now.
Mhm.
All right, moving on. Wade J asks, what work did Killorn put in over the summer to get back to the same level of production he had previously? So kind of what do you anticipate this season for Alex Killorn?
Well, I think part of it is just how long he had off. Like this is probably the longest off season he's had. Who knows? Maybe like the last 7 years, right? Because he's been in the playoffs pretty much every year before last year with Tampa, and I think he talked about even just this past one when they got knocked out in the first round. He said that was even the longest offseason he'd had in a
Yeah.
while. So I think for him, especially just because he had the knee surgery, and he did look a little bit more like himself at the end of last season. And so to get another longer off season and kind of make sure that everything's good, get to relax, hang out with family. He got married this off season, so that's really cool to see. And just make sure that he's getting ready for the new season and everything feels good. I mean, like obviously he's not the youngest guy, but the off season, I know Troy Terry has talked about this as well. The off season is a time for guys to kind of heal up and make sure that they're ready for the next season. So I think for him, it's not even just what he's doing, it's what he's not doing. And that's not playing all summer long, or at least deep into the summer where he had been doing in the past several seasons. So I think for him, it was actually beneficial that he got some time off for once.
Yeah, I just looked it up and he hadn't missed the playoffs since 2013. So 10 straight years of playoff runs and deep, deep playoff runs as well. So, but yeah, I think for him, it's just about health. It's, we talked to him and he said like his knee had been bothering him for pretty much like years now, and that just getting it cleaned up made a world of difference, and it was very, very noticeable. Toward the end of the year, he was making much more of an impact on a nightly basis in every situation. Especially I would say on the forecheck where he can kind of get on defenders a little, just once half a step quicker even, and be more disruptive, and that just opens up so much ice and ability for his line mates, which we're looking forward and projecting it could be Cutter Gauthier and Leo Carlsson, and just opens up so much ice for them to create and operate and do what makes them special. So I think for him, it's just about health, and now he's got this extended period of rest that he's never had. So it's I mean I'm anticipating just a newer, brighter, more energetic Killorn, and it's kind of exciting to think about, especially with his projected line mates and what he can do to kind of raise the tide of that line. Hey, let's move up here to okay. Brad B asks, how long does Fowler remain a Duck?
Well, I think at this point, I mean, he's got, is it 2 more years
Mhm.
on his contract, and he has a very, very limited team list that he can be traded to. So, I mean, I think Cam Fowler, if everything holds, I think he's just going to be a Duck until the end of his career, whether that's 2 years from now or 3 years from now, whatever length of time he has left on his NHL career. I think he's going to end that as an Anaheim Duck, and I don't think there's any real argument against that. I mean, he still plays a lot for them. I mean, he probably shouldn't play as many minutes as he did last season, especially with guys like Minchikov and Zellweger kind of growing into their roles. But I don't see any reason why Fowler will be a member of any other NHL organization until he retires.
I agree. His four-team trade list is very, very limiting. So unless he requests a trade, which would entail something went wrong within the next however long, 2 years, that he's here for at least 2 years. And then I think he's just so ingrained into the organization and the community that, you know, and he's still an effective player, again, just maybe not at 25 minutes a night, that he can still bring a lot to the locker room and bring a lot on the ice, even um, eventually, maybe in 3 years in a bottom pair role, or even a sixth, seventh defenseman past that. But it might just be a Pavelski, Getzlav type slow, like 1 year contract after 1 year contract until he decides to hang him up. But it's kind of daunting and weird to even try to think about picturing Kemp Fowler in a different jersey, um, and in a different organization. But again, unless he requests a trade, I don't know if that's it really in the best interest or in the desires and wants of everyone involved. So I would anticipate Fowler being a Duck, mm, beyond even the next 2 years. And then, yes, that's already. Okay, David H asks, all of the Ducks discussion centers around the high potential of the young players. Is there a realistic scenario that results in the Ducks not being a lottery team again?
Realistic scenario, I mean, I think at this point you want to see them take steps, right? They finished with 59 and 58 points in the last 2 seasons, top three picks both times. And I mean, realistically, top three picks are great because most of the time that means these players are going to be great players in the future. But also at some point, you have to start taking steps. And the Ducks haven't had a season where they've reached 80 points since 2019 20. And that was the year that COVID shut down the end of the season. So I think you do need to see them. I think if you get to 70 points, I think that should probably be the benchmark, which is not out of the question because the Ducks had, I think it was 12 overtime losses in 2022, 23. And then last year they only had five, but they lost a lot of one goal games. So I think if you can start flipping some of those around, you're going to get some of those points back that you probably should have. So I think 70 points is the benchmark. And then if you get more than that, then that's when you start creeping towards a playoff spot. So once you get to 80, 85, that's when you start getting into that area where hey, maybe these guys can push for a wild card spot. So
Yeah, what are we defining as lottery?
lottery, I guess, would be bottom 10.
Like a chance of winning the lottery, like selecting first
Yeah,
overall. Okay. What are the odds? Uh, Maybe 25%. But I think you're right. There were intangible steps that the team took last year that was pretty undeniable for anyone who watched them. You know, they were way more competitive on a nightly basis and in every situation. The the biggest now we just need to see tangible improvements, I think. And in every situation, 5-on-5 penalty kill, power play, and the what separates them, in my opinion, from the Blackhawks and Sharks of the world as is their young players have the experience now. They know what's expected of them. They know what an 82 game season entails. That there shouldn't be any more adjustment period or growing pains that these other teams might face while they're still integrating these key pieces into the roles that they'll assume long term. So if you look at the Ducks roster, Leo Carlsson's their 1C. He was their 1C last year, and Minchikov, 20 minutes a night, so on and so forth. So I just think now it's about taking tangible steps, and even hitting 70 points is an 11-point improvement. Um, and to get out of the bottom 10, you're looking at like 85 points, which it might be a little too far out of reach. But again, it's not out of the realm of possibility. There's always teams that surprise. Look at the Devils 2 years ago. So I mean, yeah, I'd say 25%.
yeah, and a lot of that also comes back to how many injuries they had. I mean, like I guess like you like to use that as an excuse, but I mean, it's that's just the fact is that they had so many injuries. It's like at some point they were just unable to kind of gel because guys were out with injury for so long. So I think this team, fully healthy, I think they're definitely more than capable of putting up 58 and 59 points. So I think that's a big part of that as well.
Yeah, a lot of guys were forced into roles that they either weren't ready for or they um aren't suited for. Like Frank Vetrano and Ryan Strome probably shouldn't be first liners at this point. At times they were playing first line minutes. So it's like if with everyone healthy, it kind of situates everyone in a proper position, and then it just creates more depth, and then you're harder to match up against, and you can kind of dictate play and dictate matchups instead of having them dictated for you by the opponent. Oh, okay. Which one do you think is more? Oh, sorry. Dr. Plant Wrench asks, which one do you think is more likely, the Ducks sneaking into a wild card or finishing with a top five pick? So-
More likely,
hmm.
I don't know. I think earlier, I think I would have said lottery pick, but you kind of had me. You're kind of convincing me a little bit earlier with the uncertainty of the rest of the Pacific. So I think it's really tough to say because I think for me, I think just the injuries like really wrecked their season because I mean, you look at somebody like Trevor Zegras is supposed to be an integral part of their offense, and he was out for most of the season. So um, I'll go wild card just because I think that if they finish 3 years in a row, um, with the top three pick, that's just, or I mean, I guess top five pick, but that's not very great in terms of progress.
Yeah, at a certain point, it becomes detrimental, and it's like there's like a fine line between um like forever rebuilds and taking those next steps. It's like, well, if it's not next year that they take a significant step, then you're looking at 2 years in the future from there that they can potentially push for a playoff spot. And it's just like how long, and then by then, Mason McTavish is 24 years old and Troy Terry's 30, and it's just like you're approaching the like Buffalo Sabres of a couple years ago territory when now it seems like they're finally taking those steps. But man, it's been 15 years and then that they haven't seen the playoffs. And it's just like, and at a certain point, it's just the culture, it just like continues to pile on and you're like in quicksand at that point. So Gabriel V asks, are there any Ducks prospects you believe are going to make it once given time? Um, I'm ass I'm assuming like the Ducks prospects that haven't reached the NHL yet that are going to become impact players.
Um, for me, I mean, Igor Sidorov is one that I think if he rounds out the rest of his game, like obviously he's a great scorer, so if he can round out the rest of his game, I think he has a really great shot of making it. Let's see. I'm really excited to see what Damian Clara can do just
Good
with
one.
more time. I mean, like the Ducks have been great at developing goalies for who knows how long, like, since the end of time. So I think if he can continue to develop, like he had a great season last year in the Allsvenskan, and now he's going to be playing in the SHL for Farjestad with Stian Solberg on his team. So I think those are two of the guys I'd be really excited to see heading into the season.
Yeah, Solberg, yeah, for sure. I'm still excited about the guys drafted in the 2023 draft, not Carlson excluded, the like Mijatovics and Petrie and Harry Terrence, just because they're just such their styles are just so complementary to the Ducks' skill positions. Like if you picture a line with in the future of like Carlson, Seneca, and Carey Trance, and then it just it just works as far as line construction. Just you just have that guy like Kaloran currently who just forechecks and is disruptive and then gets to the front of the net and wins battles. And that kind of player is so important, in my opinion, to the growth and success of, the Leo Carlsons and your more high skilled offensively potential players. Um, like Sam Bennett to Matt Kachuk kind of player that he just opens up so much ice for that kind of guy. Um, I guess that'll do it. Uh, yeah. So okay, that'll do it for myself and Derek. I just want to say real quick that we were deeply affected by what happened to Johnny Gaudreau and our thoughts are with his family. And it was you probably watched him a lot. I got to see him probably a dozen times live in person, and it was just such a joy to watch him play hockey. And I think, our like I said, our hearts and thoughts are to his family, and he was just so much fun to watch, and just one of those guys that when you're when you're watching him live and he revs up through the neutral zone, you just sat on the edge of your chair because you knew something special could happen at any moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of reasons to root for Johnny Gaudreau. Right? He's an undersized guy. He's an American player too, as well. So you get to see him playing through World Juniors, and then he was playing World Championships as well, and things like that. And, um, especially just, I was looking at it last night actually, while just everything was going on, and the last game that he played at Honda Center, it was a really great game too. I happened to be there for that just because it was a home game for the Ducks, but Columbus ended up winning 7-4, and Johnny Gaudreau had 3 points. So I was just, it's really, it's, I mean, when things like that happen, it puts so much in perspective, and just like the fragility of everything. So definitely want to extend my condolences to the Gaudreau family, and just such a just devastating loss for their family. Um, I'm like, there's just no word you can say that can kind of just uh, soften the blow of like a loss like that. So
Yeah, he meant a lot to a lot of people, myself included, hockey fans everywhere, and obviously, his family. But that'll do it for us. And if we didn't answer your question, we only have a couple, but we're going to answer it in a mailbag article, just a real quick one in the coming days. But thank you for watching. And as the season starts and camps begin, we'll do more of these, and we'll just kind of give our thoughts about where the Ducks are at currently, and hopefully a lot of good stuff on the horizon. So we'll see you next time.